HOA Karen tries to evict me. Didn't know I own the whole neighborhood. Before we begin, press the like button and subscribe so we can continue making videos like this one. Moving into my new house was supposed to be a fresh start. I had worked hard, saved up, and finally bought a gorgeous home in a quiet, well-maintained community. But as I soon learned, quiet didn't mean peaceful, because living across the street was Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. I had barely started unpacking when I got my first warning. A crisp white envelope was taped to my front door, stamped with the dreaded words, HOA Violation Notice. Confused, I opened it up and read, "Dear resident, it has come to our attention that your residence is in violation of several community guidelines. Please remove all non-conforming furniture from your front porch and ensure all visible belongings meet aesthetic standards. Failure to comply will result in further action. Sincerely, the HOA Board." I frowned, looking around. I had only one chair on my porch, a simple, modern outdoor seat that matched the house perfectly. There were no obnoxious lawn ornaments, no broken dung cars in my driveway, nothing that should have been an issue. Then I spotted her. Karen was standing across the street, arms crossed, watching. I waved, playing nice. "Morning, neighbor." She didn't wave back. Instead, she marched straight up to my driveway. "You need to remove that chair," she snapped, pointing at it like it personally offended her. I blinked. "What? Why?" "It doesn't match community standards," she huffed, tilting her nose up. "We don't allow unsightly furniture, ruining the neighborhood aesthetic." I looked at the chair, then back at her. "Karen, it's literally just a chair." "It's not approved," she insisted, voice tight. "And neither is your house, actually." I raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" She smirked. "We weren't informed of a new tenant. Did the previous owner get this purchase approved by the board?" That's when it hit me. Karen thought I was a renter. She assumed I had no real stake in the community, just some random person moving in without her permission. I decided to play along. "I don't think the owner needed to check in with you." Her smile widened like she had just caught me in a trap. "Oh, but they do. See, we have strict policies about who can live here. If the homeowner didn't get this approved, then I'm afraid I'll have to start the eviction process." I let out a small laugh. "Eviction?" "Yes," she said smugly. "We don't allow renters to disturb our community." That's when I decided to drop the bomb. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my house keys and twirled them around my finger. "That's great to hear, Karen, because I'm not a renter. I'm the new owner." Her entire expression collapsed, the confidence, the smug superiority gone in an instant. You bought this house?" she asked, voice cracking. I grinned. "Yep, paid in full, signed, sealed, delivered." Karen opened her mouth, then shut it again. She looked genuinely horrified. Then, as if she hadn't just threatened to kick me out of my own home, she plastered on the fakest smile I had ever seen. "Well," she said, her voice suddenly dripping with false sweetness. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm the president of the HOA, so if you need anything, you can come to me." I nodded. Good to know. Then I turned and shut my door in her face. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next few days, I started getting more and more HOA violation notices. First, it was my porch light, then my trash bins being visible from the street, then the fact that my car was parked in my own driveway. Karen was clearly on a warpath. She couldn't evict me, so she was trying to make my life hell. But what she didn't know, I had a secret. Because I didn't just own this house. I owned several houses. In fact, I owned a third of the entire neighborhood. And Karen? She was about to learn just how much power I really had. The next morning, I woke up to yet another HOA violation notice taped to my door, but this one was different. It wasn't just a warning. It was a formal complaint demanding an immediate hearing before the HOA board. Apparently, my front yard was neglected and out of compliance with neighborhood standards. I had moved in less than a week ago, and my lawn was perfectly manicured. I stared at the paper, shaking my head, as Mark, my next-door neighbor, walked over, coffee in hand, grinning like he was watching a reality TV show unfold in real life. "You really pissed off Queen Karen," he chuckled, nodding at the letter in my hand. "She's been running around all morning talking to the other board members. She's out for blood." I sighed. I figured as much. She tried to evict me before realizing I actually own the house. Now she's just doubling down. Mark sipped his coffee. "Oh, it gets better. She doesn't know you own more than just this place, does she?" I smirked. "Not yet." That afternoon, I walked into the HOA office, fully expecting Karen to have stacked the deck against me, and sure enough, she was already seated at the long wooden conference table, a folder full of paperwork spread out in front of her. The other board members sat beside her, looking equal parts tired and amused. Greg, the HOA vice president, barely glanced up as I sat down. "Let's get this over with," he muttered. Clearly, even the other board members were sick of Karen's antics. Karen launched into her speech, flipping through her papers dramatically. "As you all can see, this homeowner has repeatedly violated our standards. His lawn is unkempt, his porch is cluttered, and his deliveries are excessive. He is disrupting the harmony of our beautiful community." I leaned back in my chair. "My lawn is mowed, my porch has exactly one chair, and I get Amazon deliveries just like everyone else here." Karen's face turned red. "That's not the point. The point is, he doesn't respect the community's aesthetic." Greg sighed, rubbing his temples. "Karen, do you have actual evidence of these violations?" Karen gestured wildly at her paperwork. "I have photos." I looked at the images she had printed. One showed a single blade of grass slightly taller than the others. Another captured my trash bins on pickup day, literally at the curb where they were supposed to be. The last one? A single Amazon package on my porch. I let out a short laugh. "Karen, are you serious?" Karen scowled. "This is a serious matter. We cannot allow homeowners to lower property values by disregarding the rules." That's when I dropped the bomb. I pulled out my own folder and slid it across the table. "Actually, Karen, I think we need to discuss your violations." Karen stiffened. "What are you talking about?" I smiled. I did some digging. Turns out, as the self-proclaimed enforcer of HOA rules, you've been breaking quite a few yourself. I flipped to the first document. For example, the community guidelines clearly state that trash cans cannot be left outside for more than 6 hours after pickup. Yet, here's a photo of your bins still out the next morning. Karen's face paled. That's irrelevant." "Oh, there's more," I continued, flipping the page. Guideline 14B states that all vehicles must be parked in designated driveways or garages. But here's a picture of your car parked on the street, repeatedly. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I leaned forward, lowering my voice just enough to sound dangerously calm. "And let's not forget the fact that you built an unapproved extension on your backyard patio. No permits, no approval from the board. That's a major violation." Greg looked at the papers, then turned to Karen. "Is this true?" Karen swallowed hard. "That's different." Greg sighed, closing the folder. "Karen, we've had enough of this nonsense. You can't harass homeowners for non-existent violations while you're breaking half the rules yourself." Karen's entire body went rigid. But, case dismissed," Greg announced, standing up. "And Karen, you might want to get your own violations sorted immediately." I smirked as I walked out. Karen was shaking with rage, her entire world crumbling. But she wasn't done, not yet, because as I left the building, I heard her mutter under her breath, "I'll find another way." And I knew then, this war was far from over. The next few days were eerily quiet. No more violation notices, no more passive-aggressive messages from the HOA, and most importantly, no sign of Karen. It was suspicious. Karen didn't just back down. She was planning something. I could feel it. Mark even joked, "Dude, you might want to check if she's building a secret bunker to plot your downfall." We laughed, but deep down, I knew he wasn't far off. Karen's silence wasn't surrender. It was a recalibration. And then, it happened. A letter from the HOA arrived in my mailbox, but this one wasn't a violation notice. It was an eviction notice, signed by the board demanding I vacate my own home due to persistent community disruptions and failure to comply with homeowner standards. I actually laughed when I read it. Karen was really trying this. Mark walked over just as I was holding up the paper. No way, she actually did it? Oh, she did it, I said, shaking my head. She went nuclear. Mark snatched the letter from my hand, reading it over. Dude, she doesn't even have the power to evict you. The HOA doesn't own the property. They can fine you, harass you, but they can't just kick you out. I grinned. She's about to find that out the hard way. I immediately contacted my lawyer, who confirmed what I already knew. This was completely illegal. The HOA could enforce certain rules, but an actual eviction? That was laughable. What made it even funnier was that Karen hadn't even gone through the proper channels. She had convinced a handful of board members to sign off on it, but it hadn't gone through any official process. In other words, she had faked an eviction order. Instead of reacting, I waited. I wanted Karen to think she had won, and sure enough, the next morning, she was glowing. Smiling, waving to neighbors, probably patting herself on the back for restoring order to her perfect community. That's when I decided it was time to let her know exactly who she was messing with. I called an emergency HOA meeting, not as a resident under attack, but as a property owner. Karen was already seated when I arrived, looking smug beyond belief. She barely contained her glee as she said, "I'm surprised you even showed up. We assumed you'd be packing by now." I set a stack of legal documents on the table and leaned forward. "Actually, Karen, I came to discuss something important. The future of this community." Karen scoffed. "There's nothing to discuss. The board already made their decision. You have 30 days to vacate." I chuckled. "Yeah, about that. You see, you don't have the authority to evict me. In fact, the eviction notice you sent me, it's completely fraudulent. You didn't file it properly, it wasn't reviewed legally, and you bypassed the actual process." I slid a document across the table. "This is from my lawyer. Consider this a formal cease and desist. If you don't retract your fake eviction, you're looking at a lawsuit." Karen's smile wavered. "This is nonsense." "Oh, and one more thing," I continued, pulling out another document. "I wasn't planning on mentioning this, but since you tried to remove me from my own home, I thought I'd clarify something. You do know I own multiple properties here, right?" Karen's jaw clenched. "You what?" I nodded. "That's right, I own 10 houses in this neighborhood. That means I have a say in what happens here. In fact, according to the bylaws, because I own more than 10% of the properties in this community, I have voting power that surpasses even yours." Silence. Complete, utter silence. Karen's face turned a deep shade of red. That's ridiculous. You..." Greg, the vice president, cut her off. "Karen, is this true?" I smiled, pulling out one final document. "And actually, I'd like to make a motion. Effective immediately, I'd like to propose a vote of no confidence in the current HOA president." Karen's eyes went wide. "You can't?" Greg cleared his throat. "Actually, he can." The vote was held right then and there. Karen was removed from her position as HOA president. And as her final act of desperation, she tried to argue, yell, and even threaten legal action. But the board was done with her. The neighborhood was done with her. And within a week, a new HOA president was elected, a much more reasonable, sane, and less Karen-like individual. As for Karen, she put her house up for sale the next day. Mark sent me a picture of the "for sale" sign in her yard with a single text, "Victory." And just like that, the neighborhood was finally free.